Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Dirty Hands Clean Living. My name is Star, and today I'm going to be talking about everything you need to know to start a garden, and I'm going to be explaining it in a way so that anyone can do it. So if you want to find out how to start your own garden this year, please keep watching. Now, I will be going through a lot of information in this video. I will try to keep it short and sweet, but I recommend keeping a notepad or getting out a tablet or something to take notes on. That way you can just kind of follow along and stay organized. Step 1. Get some tea. Right now, onto the actual step 1, which is figuring out what and where you're going to grow. Now, it sounds obvious, but you really want to start thinking about and making a list of the fruits, vegetables, herbs that you want to grow this year, and you obviously want to pick things that you will actually eat. And another thing to start thinking about right now is what are you going to do with all of this food at the end of the growing season? Like once it's all ready to harvest, where is it going to go? Do you have a way to can things? Do you have a way to freeze things? Or do you have a bunch of friends, family, and neighbors that you could give all of your extras to? Just start thinking about it now. Obviously you have some time, but you don't want to be caught off guard at the end of the growing season. The next thing you want to think about is how big is your growing space? Now, if you are able to measure it and get exact measurements, that's the most helpful, but I have eyeballed things in my own garden, so you can always do that too. Just make a note of the dimensions of your growing space on your notepad, whether it's an indoor growing space, maybe you have an apartment and you have like a sunny window ledge, or maybe you have a balcony that you could fit some containers on, or maybe you have like a giant yard. Just plan out exactly the space that you want to grow in. And I'll give you guys some ideas too. Even if you live in an apartment, maybe you have no windows in your apartment, there's still a way for you to grow food. Another thing to think about is whatever space you've decided you want to grow in, you need to make sure that it's going to have enough sunlight. And again, if you're growing inside, I'll talk about ways that you can supplement that later with some grow lights. But if you're growing outside, you want to make sure you pick a very sunny space. Generally, you want it to have anywhere from 8 to 10 hours of sun a day, I believe. If I'm incorrect, I'll put it on the screen. Generally, most fruits and vegetables need full sun. Kind of like step 1, part 2 is figuring out what you want to grow in. Now, are you going to grow in the ground outside if you have a backyard? Are you going to grow in raised bed containers? Or are you going to grow in just containers like pots and things like that? Now, just as a brief explanation of each of these methods, if you're growing in ground, the easiest method that I have heard of is the no-dig or no-till method. Wherever you want to grow your food, you lay a layer of cardboard down to kind of kill all of the grass and the weeds there, and you wet it so it'll decompose a little bit easier, and then you just top it with all of your soil, compost, mulch, that kind of thing. And you can start this in the fall, winter, and let it sit like over winter, and it'll actually decompose and be ready for you by spring. But if you are starting late and just getting started now, you can just do that and plant straight through the cardboard actually. So you'll just make a little hole in the cardboard. Again, make sure everything's well saturated with water, but you can still just plant directly in that. The next method is raised bed gardening. Now, raised bed gardening is great because it has greater water drainage and airflow, so you don't have to worry about plants getting waterlogged or anything like that. And also, since it's raised, it's a little bit easier on your back to kind of get in and weed those beds as well. They are one of the more expensive options on this list, or they can be at least. There are ways to do it cheap with like salvage materials and things like that, but it's a little bit more labor intensive and more expensive as well. And then the last method that I'm going to talk about is container gardening. That is what I will be doing this year, so you can follow along with my journey doing that. And container gardening is just growing in containers, and you can grow in pretty much anything as long as it has good drainage, and you can even make drainage by drilling holes in like plastic storage bins, plastic totes, you know, just really anything. I've seen people use milk jugs. You just want to make sure for certain things you will need different depths. Like if you're growing root vegetables like carrots, you'll need a deeper container to grow in, but you can grow, you know, just as much in containers as you can in the ground. Now, on to step 2. So you should have your list of everything you want to grow at this point in the video, as well as the space of your garden that you're working with. And, you know, if you're looking at those two things in your notes, they may not match up so much. Like maybe you have a 4x4 growing space, but you have, you know, 20 different plants you want to grow. Now, this is the hard part. You're going to have to narrow down and pick what you want to grow in that small amount of space. But another thing you want to take into account is what your growing zone is and what fruits and vegetables, herbs will grow best in your growing zone. Now, if you don't know what your growing zone is, all it takes to find out is a quick Google search. I'll even leave a link in the description to a website where you can just plug in your location and it'll tell you your growing zone. Basically, all growing zones are is they take into account the average first and last frost dates for your area, and then they'll tell you your average growing season. And growing zones are just helpful so that you can kind of map out and plan when you're going to start planting everything that you want to grow. Because, for example, if you do find out your growing season is relatively short and is, I don't know, I'm just pulling out a number like 120 days, and you see that something takes 150 days to mature, it may not be right for your growing season. That doesn't mean that you can't grow that type of fruit or vegetable. There may possibly be a variety out there that is more suited to your growing zones. You may just have to do a little bit more research in that aspect, or look into things like building a cold frame or a greenhouse to extend your growing season. Kind of going along with step 2, this is kind of like step 2 part 2. It is very helpful when you're finding out all of these dates and doing all of this research to keep a garden journal or have a specific kind of, for example, I have like my wall calendar here. This is just like a free one I got in the mail, just to keep track of all of the dates and things that you have learned. So I have like my basil should start germinating here because I planted them in January, and then I have my 8 weeks before last frost noted on here as well. A planner like this is nice too. I just actually found this one after I'd already started my calendar, but you can mark all your dates in here too, and then also put notes like, oh, this started sprouting today, or this started to, maybe get a little bit yellow. This is what I'm going to do to troubleshoot it. I think it's really helpful to get a garden journal just to keep track of your progress, because again, it'll keep track of maybe things that you tried that went wrong or things that you tried that worked really well. It'll just be easier in the long run to kind of look back on what maybe you already tried last year or your first year and see what you can tweak from that. I found that really helpful just in my first year, and I didn't really see anyone recommend that tip. It's just something that I decided to do for myself. Something to note whenever you are writing down all of these dates is take your first and last frost dates with a grain of salt, write them down on there, but again, just use them as a guideline, and then start looking at the 10-day forecast as it gets closer so you can maybe see if you could plant earlier or maybe if you need to plant later. Also keep in mind, this is maybe something more advanced, maybe you don't want to focus on this your first time planting, but if you feel up to the challenge, start thinking about staggering your plantings. That way you get a continuous harvest throughout the year. For example, if you took your whole packet of carrot seeds, I'm going to keep using carrots as an example, and you plant all of them at once, they are all going to reach maturity at once, and then you're going to have to harvest all of them at once, and you may have way too many carrots than you could possibly go through. A better way to do this is to stagger the plantings and maybe plant several carrots one week and then plant a few more the next week or 2 weeks after, and just kind of stagger them that way. You could also use your calendar or planner to track your next plantings. This is also the point in the process where I would say start researching all of your fruits and vegetables. This is the most time-consuming part and the part that I would say seems the most daunting to everyone, but just take it one step at a time. Go down your list and be like, okay, I have carrots on my list. I'm going to research a little bit about carrots first, and then go down your list to the next thing. Maybe it's lettuce, and be like, I'm going to research when I should plant lettuce, how far apart it needs to be planted, and all of those kinds of things. Depending on how difficult the vegetables you chose are to grow, you may choose to skip over those for this year and just start with the easier ones. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's so much easier to start small rather than to try and manage all of these fruits and vegetables and dates and things your first year. And I'm not even taking my own advice on this, honestly. I spoke about it in my last video, but I think it's really important if you're doing what I'm doing and starting with maybe a little bit more than what is recommended, it's important to go into it with the right mindset. Be prepared your first year gardening to harvest lessons and not necessarily harvest these perfect, amazing, giant fruits and vegetables. You may have issues with pests, or maybe you are underwatering or overwatering. There's just going to be some learning curves that you have to get through the first year. So keep that in mind. If you mess up on a few of your plants, those seeds were fractions of a cent. So really don't stress out about it too much. And again, you can always apply what you have learned on your fall crop later this year or on next year's garden. Just go into it with an open mind. Imperfect progress is better than no progress. On to step 3. Step 3 is action. It's time to take action. Make sure that you know exactly how wide apart you're going to be spacing your plants and where you're going to plant them, and also to just gather your general supplies. So you want to go and buy your either seeds or plant starts. I haven't talked about plant starts yet, and basically what they are is that if you don't want to grow from seed, if it just seems too difficult for you, or maybe you're getting started later in the growing season and don't have time to grow from seed, you can grow from starts. If you just go to Lowe's, Home Depot, any garden center in your area. The starts are basically just a plant that has already been started for you, so it's already grown a little bit, but you can just buy those. They're usually, I want to say $3 to $5, just depending on what kind of plant it is, but you can then just take those and put it directly into the ground. And then as far as buying your seeds, some of my favorite places to buy seeds are Baker Creek. They're probably the biggest, most well-known seed company. They have a wide variety of unique vegetables, fruits, herbs, everything. And then if you are looking for some cheaper options, some places that I love are M.I. Gardener. All their seed packets, I believe, or most of them, are 99 cents, and you get a lot of seeds in them, and they have some really nice unique varieties in there as well. And then I have not shopped from this place, but I hear good things. Another place to get seeds is Little Shop of Seeds, and their seed packets are 55 cents. You can also get really affordable cheap seeds at Dollar Tree or Dollar General, somewhere like that, and their seeds are perfectly fine to use. Don't feel like they're any better or worse because they're from Dollar Tree. And another option, and this is the cheapest because it's free, is to go to a seed swap in your area. So go on Facebook and look for some events in your area. Even if you don't have any seeds to bring, a lot of them do welcome beginners, and they'll just give you any extra seeds that they have left over. The next thing that you'll need is to buy all of your soil for whether you're growing in containers or even growing in ground. You'll need to get your compost and fertilizer for the top of that bed. And what I recommend just starting out, and again, you can make this a lot more complicated and I can go in depth in the future. What I got for my garden this year just to start is some garden soil, which has a little bit of nutrients in it already, but I also bought some worm castings, which are like a compost or like a nutrient-rich product that I'm going to mix in with the garden soil just to add a lot more nutrition for my plants. I also bought some perlite just for added drainage in my containers that I'm going to be growing in. Especially for growing in containers, and also raised beds fall into this category. You want to make sure that it has good drainage and doesn't all just sit and soak in the water, because you can drown your plants. The next thing you'll need are just some basic gardening tools. I will link in the description to a video that I thought was really cool where he made these gardening scoops, shovels, spades, things like that, all from a milk jug. So you don't have to spend any money on that, and you will get a lot of good garden tools from that. But I do recommend getting a spade and a weeding spade, or I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but it's like a spade that has a sharp serrated blade on the end to kind of cut into things as well. Another thing I wanted to mention before moving on is if you're looking to buy seeds, you do not need to buy seeds that are labeled non-GMO or organic. Gary Pillarchick here on YouTube, and I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Gary, but he told me about this in one of his videos. Basically, they don't sell GMO seeds to small consumers like us. They only sell them in mass bulk amounts to large farmers anyway. So really, if you see seeds that maybe aren't marked non-GMO and then some that are, they're the same. They're not going to be GMO. They just don't sell those to small consumers like us. So don't feel like you have to spend the extra money to buy non-GMO organic seeds. They're going to be pretty much the same thing. I also wanted to touch just very briefly on seed starting. All you really need is some trays, something to start your seeds in. You can go and buy trays, or you can just use some empty takeout containers, plastic solo cups, anything. Then you will also need some seed starting mix, which I think it's cheaper just to go buy it than trying to mix it all up. I bought a big bag for only $7 and I've only used a tiny bit of it. I would also say that you need either a very, very bright window or grow lights. I bought the cheapest grow lights I could find. They were $12 on Walmart. They were LED grow lights, and they're working great for my seedlings, only because I don't have a really bright window in my house. If you have a very bright south-facing window, you could try and start your seedlings there, but they might get a little bit leggy if they don't get enough light. And leggy just means that they're going to grow tall and skinny and maybe be a little bit weaker of a plant. So you want to make sure you have enough light, you want to make sure you have something to grow them in, and you want to make sure you have the soil to grow them in as well. But that's really all you need. And then you just want to make sure that you water them well. Some extras that are nice to have later are a heat mat. It just helps your seeds germinate faster. And then also a fan, which can help with air circulation, makes your plants a little bit stronger again because the wind provides some resistance, and then also helps keep fungus off of the plants as well. Also, another side note on starting seeds, do not not fertilize them. You do not need to fertilize your seeds. You can actually over-fertilize and burn the plant if you are not careful. And as far as actually planting the seeds go, generally you want to plant your seeds twice as deep as they are wide. So if you have like the really tiny lettuce seeds, you basically just scatter those on top and just kind of lightly press them in, because they're very, very tiny, so you don't want them to be too deep and not get any light. With bigger seeds, like, I don't know, beans or corn, you want to plant them again twice as deep as they are wide. I just want to send you guys off with some final tips and tricks. Your first year gardening, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's going to be filled with a lot of trials and tribulations probably. And if not, you're very lucky from what I hear. You know, maybe you're gonna have some pests that you have to deal with. Just take those problems one day at a time as they happen, do some research, and it's great to just learn slowly along the way. At least for me, it's easiest to learn by doing. I will also touch on in the future organic pest control, because that's basically all you need to worry about with organic gardening, in my eyes at least. Really the only thing that you're changing when you buy organic produce is that you're changing that, oh, I'm picking produce that's not been sprayed with bad pesticides. It's also really important to stay consistent, or to put into place systems that will help you stay consistent, especially with, you know, watering, weeding, and that kind of thing. If you don't think you're actually going to get outside and water your plants like every other day or multiple times a week, and be honest with yourself here, you know, maybe you need to go buy a sprinkler or some kind of irrigation system. Another huge thing is to take everything that you read, see, or hear with a grain of salt, because there are so many different ways to garden. There's so many different methods that people use. And if you're in doubt about like what to do, what to try, I mean, just try it out. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, or maybe you'll discover something that works really well for you. There's nothing quite like the first time that you garden. At least for me, like even my first few seedlings that I've seen sprout up, it's just, there's something so special about it. And I hope that some of you guys get to experience that with me. You're not gonna get better until you just start doing it. So I really hope to see you guys out in the garden with me this year. Please leave me a comment down below, and just again, keep me updated on your progress, your wins, your losses, lessons that you have already learned, or things that you're trying to troubleshoot, and hopefully we can work through them together. So thank you guys again for watching. Please subscribe if you would like to learn and grow with me. Bye.